Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her two daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the two named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes, and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house, and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit.
Once upon a time, there was a woman who had no children. She once went to a good witch for help. The woman said she was dreaming of a child. The sorceress gave her a seed and ordered to plant it in a flower pot. The woman was very happy, thanked the old woman, and went home. At home, she planted a seed, watered it, and began to wait patiently. Soon a large wonderful flower, like a tulip, grew in the pot. When its petals opened, there was a tiny girl inside. She was very small, no more than an inch. Therefore, the woman called her Thumbelina. One night, when Thumbelina was fast asleep, a huge toad climbed onto the window of the house, wet and ugly. She grabbed the sleeping girl and hurried to her swamp. The toad decided to marry her ugly son to the beautiful Thumbelina. She planted her in the middle of the river on a wide lily leaf so that the girl would not run away. In the morning, Thumbelina woke up, and realized that she was not at home, but there was water around her. When the girl realized what a terrible fate awaited her, she wept bitterly. At this moment, small fish swam past. They felt sorry for Thumbelina. They gnawed at the stem of the lily, and the leaf floated with the flow with the girl. A large beetle flew past. Seeing a beautiful girl, he grabbed her and carried her to a tree, where he introduced her to his friends. They all envied her beauty, but said that Thumbelina was very ugly and could not be in their company. Under pressure from acquaintances, the beetle also decided that she was ugly, lowered the girl to the ground and said goodbye. All summer Thumbelina lived alone in the forest. She made a cradle for herself from grass and leaves. She ate on pollen and dew, basked in the sun in clear weather, and hid from the rain under a large leaf of burdock. But soon cold rains and winds came. Thumbelina did not have a winter outfit, and she began to freeze. The girl suffered from hunger and cold. And one day she was sheltered by a field mouse. They lived together gloriously. The girl helped the mouse with the housework, told her fairy tales, and in return received warm housing and food. The field mouse had a neighbor, a wealthy blind mole, who did this by counting his wealth all the time. Even being blind, the mole realized that Thumbelina was very cute and offered to marry her. But the girl was not at all happy about this. She did not like the boring mole. Once, walking along the underground passages, Thumbelina saw a wounded swallow, which almost died of the cold. All winter she took care of the sick bird and by the spring she cured her. Before the wedding, Thumbelina asked the mouse to let her go upstairs to admire the sun at last. When she climbed out of the mouse hole, she saw a swallow, which she cured. Thumbelina complained to the bird that she was being forced to marry a nasty mole and live with him deep underground. The swallow invited the girl to fly with her to warm lands, and she agreed. She quickly said goodbye to the mouse, climbed onto the swallow, and they flew away. Once in a wonderful country, Thumbelina saw a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. She chose the most beautiful flower for herself to live in. Suddenly, she saw in the flower the same little man as she, only with wings. It was the king of the elves. And an elf lived in every flower. The beautiful elf has never seen a girl as small as himself, and even so beautiful. He immediately fell in love with Thumbelina, and invited her to become his wife, the queen of the elves and the queen of flowers. After all her adventures, the girl was happy to hear such an offer from the charming prince. She happily agreed. The elf took Thumbelina by the hand, and at the same moment 2 wings appeared behind her. Now she has become the queen of the elves. And since then they have lived happily ever after.